survive, co-survive, and how you can ensure that you still have the best risk posture strategy. Moving on, this would be an interesting one. So we've got lots of our customers, enterprise customers, SMEs, lots of people who are using Nessus, and we are proud to have Nessus or Nessus Pro as one of our offerings. But here our idea was to actually give you those top 5 reasons why you should move from Nessus to more of an enterprise platform. And I'll be joined with my colleague Jeff, who's kindly agreed, and it'll be a little late at his end in California, but I'm sure with BPM Summit, I'm sure we could probably pull some strings and do this best, because we understand this is an important event. Following Jeff, we'll have a live demo. So this would be, guys, live on your screen. You can actually see, look and see how you can play with Tenable.se. And finally, we end again with a kind of an up close and personal view with another practitioner, another industry friend, Rakesh Dwivedi, who is with Reliance Jio, and we'll talk to you about his ideas, his suggestions on how you could actually use vulnerability management, or you could strengthen your security posture. With that, let me just move to one interesting announcement that I would request all of you to pay attention. It's no gimmick. It's actually something that we would want you to, engage with us. If you're checking this slide, I would probably take a couple of, I'll probably take 30 seconds on this one. So request all of you to just scan that small little QR code on the right hand side, and we would. This would not be something that we'll hold on. So towards the end of the session, I would actually announce the 5 lucky winners, which I'll choose randomly out of the ones who filled up the form. There are no surprises. It's plain, simple, transparent, random selection of 5 lucky winners who scan the code, fill the small little form, and we'll announce the winners here itself. So it's not something that we'll get back to you and we'll do some logic, etc. It's simply you're filling up the form, and 5 of you getting selected. With that, let me just welcome to a colleague, to an industry senior, to somebody that I actually look up to. So Jaspal, thank you for joining us. Let me just introduce you. So friends, industry friends, Jaspal Sani is the Chief Information Security Officer at Tata Communication. He heads the Global Information Security Group and is responsible for Information Security Charter and Cybersecurity Strategy for Tata Communications. He brings with him a rich global expertise within cyber, information risk, and technology leadership roles for close to 28 years. Majority of his tenure has been with large financial institutions, be it in India, be it in Singapore. I know that prior to joining Tata Comms, Jaspal was spearheading Deutsche Bank in India and Singapore, had numerous leadership roles. He is an industry veteran. I'm sure we've all heard him. We've all, heard him in presentation sessions. He is well networked with industry bodies like DSCI. So Jaspal, with that, why don't I just stop sharing my screen and welcome you on the stage. Some opening comments, Jaspal, from your end.
Shankar, thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone. And thanks, Shankar, for a very generous introduction. I kind of started interacting with you about a couple of days back, as you said, but I definitely look forward to, carrying on our association. Not in the Tenable context, but hearing more your thoughts on. I see you as quite passionate with what you do, connecting security professionals on various topics, and this is one such attempt. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. And like in every other session, I take back more than what I share. So there is a personal interest also in being in these discussions. I look forward to that.
Thank
Over
you.
to you.
Thank you, Jaspal. And I, completely echo it. So, it's been 2 days, but yes, I can understand, and both of us are probably passionate about what we do, which is so good to hear. So let me not probably straight away jump into some interesting questions. And Jaspal, they could be tough ones, they could be easy ones. So please give us an answer which is practical, which is something that the audience here can replicate. And the intent here is that whatever we discuss has something that it's like a takeaway. And I completely agree, both of us would learn along as well. So my first question would be, infosec leaders like yourself, many a times and I've heard that, and we all read that in today's time, a cyber breach is no longer a matter of if, but a matter of when. Now, you've been in the industry for more than 28 years. How would you respond to such security incidents, or what would be your take to a peer CISO or to a peer security head or a lead? How would you suggest to them how they should take it, or how they should respond to such security incidents?
Sure. I think a very relevant question. And like they always say, those who sweat in the practice, they bleed less in the battlefield. So I think your planning and preparations on a good day will save you on the bad day. That's what I feel firmly. And it starts all with awareness. Engagement is extremely important. Remember, everyone has a role to play, and cyber and the current sort of threat scenarios and the use cases and the kind of breaches we see clearly articulate that everyone in the organization has a role to play in some way. So whether it's a salesperson, whether it's the top leadership, whether it's even the board members, whether it is communication, compliance. I'm talking about the non-usual entities, of course, technology teams and product teams and platform teams and the infosec teams. They would be managing the incident, but everybody would in some way get involved managing someone who's their stakeholder during the course of the incident. So cyber is no longer just a technical problem. So having a comprehensive incident response playbook, not just focusing on detection and response, but equally be in depth with recovery and restoration. Um, we must start including cyber disruptions as scenarios actively into the BCM planning. And the last 2 years, needless to say, most organizations would have re-energized their BCM plans, reenacted some of the scenarios. Of course, there were natural situations which forced us to go into a prolonged, phase of business continuity and remote working. But having well-documented RTOs and RPOs for your key services and measuring recovery from cyber incidents, stacking up to those RTOs and RPOs is absolutely vital. So these are some of the key points, what I believe would help an enterprise and various functions and the collective be better prepared in facing a cyber attack and dealing with it and responding and recovering from it. Shankar, we can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. I put myself on mute. And
No problem.
thank you for that, Jaspal. So thank you for that, Jaspal. Let me move to another question, which is something that most of the security practitioners actually check on. So leaders like you and generally security and IT teams are so overwhelmed with so many vulnerabilities. Which is we call it as a vulnerability overload problem. You plug some, and every day, every hour, there are some new vulnerabilities that keep creeping in. Now, in your organization, how are you managing that, Jaspal? And more importantly, what would be your advice to people who are listening to you, or in general, probably there'll be a recorded session, so people would listen to you later. What would be your advice to your fellow CISOs and security leaders on managing the so-called vulnerability overload challenge?
Yeah. So I think it's a relevant challenge what most of us who are in some leadership positions, either from an infosec side or from an IT side, have been facing, and this is not going to go away. So if we see about three 10 rated CVEs getting released in 1 week, and maybe several times in the year new 0 days, it tells us two things. One, either the threat actors are getting smarter and more motivated and more sophisticated and advanced with their attempts and success with the breaches, or we started releasing more sloppy and lousy code out there. It's got to be one out of these two. Often
True.
it's probably a combination of both. Because if we see a 2017 print spooler vulnerability getting compromised in a big way
Yeah,
in
true.
some of the recent large attacks, then it also tells that yes, those things existed, but our exposure to some of those vulnerabilities has already gone up, significantly because there is a greater motivation and a skill at the hands of the threat actors all of a sudden. So yes, any enterprise would have a vulnerability management program. People would be using tools, combination of tools and created, and hand curated and other manual sort of, scripts. You would be covering the full stack. You would be, I mean, the security testing and assurance function has been also seeing its own sort of evolution. What people used to often relate only with infrastructure vulnerability management to infra PT, to more and more emphasis now being laid on application side of pen testing, working on Dockers, working on containers, Kubernetes, the hardening guidelines, the testing guidelines, more cloud adoption, um, and more sort of, mission critical and in some cases and in some industries, life critical activity happening over untrusted networks. So I think the sort of exposure and is at a very different level. You would have on a good day, I'm saying you would have a report which shows a lot of reds, a lot of ambers. Um,
True.
so having the right expectation management in the enterprise is very important, because often what I've seen is the moment you start with this reporting and the first few iterations, there is a knee jerk reaction and almost a denial onto can we be so bad, right? And that's the first point in the storming, norming, forming, the usual journey towards improvement and towards maturity. But I think on both sides, this has to be settled in with some patience, some tolerance, and some acceptance. And then it goes on to okay, fine. Now we know this is the huge estate what we need to remediate across various technology stacks, across various forms of testing. Then comes the prioritization, because there would never be a day when you wake up and see all greens in your security
So true.
testing dashboard. So,
So
where do
true.
you prioritize? Have you identified your crown jewels? These are all, often referred and easy to say statements. But trust me, in most large organizations, it takes a great deal of concerted effort, a great deal of commitment, and this goes beyond. And I think somewhere in the discussion, we should talk about what does security management really mean? Because it's not just those 30 or 40 superheroes wearing capes, or maybe not wearing capes in the CISO organization, but it's really the extended organization which begins to now feel and see the cyber risk as their mainstream business risk. and how they get involved, either in the way of allocating more budget, not just to fix the vulnerabilities, but also to get rid of in a reasonable time frame. I'm saying reasonable after a very careful deliberation. All the end of life, end of support infrastructure platforms, all the application systems which have got a huge OEM dependency. And in some industries, this doesn't come easy. For example, in the telecom space, in the voice space, in the banking space, there is enough and ample of those verticals which are very, very specialized, and the releases don't happen as fast as what we see in some other areas. So, keeping a check on where your crown jewels are, um, what is your exposure with the new CVEs, rightly prioritizing, rightly incentivizing the teams to act on a closely tracked remediation plan, and of course, reporting it from the other end, but with a good understanding on both sides that this is not a journey which is, quick wins. You got to keep looking at places where there is a quick exposure and a quick remediation, but some of these things would easily run into 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, I would say even 24 months.
Very
But
well.
yes, this is a program which needs a sustained focus.
So true, Jaspal, and I, completely appreciate. In fact, what you said was probably appeared as if you're reading from somewhere, but you've just captured everything. So I completely agree. Identifying those crown jewels, or probably you live by it. You live by it, so it comes naturally to you. I think that's what you were trying to say, right? Cool. I think I'm also cognizant of time, and I know you've got a meeting covered up. I'll just ask one more question, Jaspal, which is, something that I've often seen, and I find that approach, but I'll probably bounce it off with you. Many organizations still, they've got this compliance or audit kind of a requirement, and they would just, take compliance equal to security, and it's like a check in the box kind of a mindset or approach. Do you see that changing, or do you see that it's something that organizations, probably SMEs, are still following? And what would be your suggestion to that kind of an approach?
Yeah, so I think the two sides of the coin. On a lighter note, and since it's a Friday, I could say that sometimes the threat actors also help us raise the profile of the cyber as a key business risk problem within the right sort of levels where it gets the right attention and the right sort of funding support. But it's not that straightforward, right? I mean, pandemic on one side has accelerated digitization. There is a immediate need for low touch to no touch operating models. All of these mean a broadened threat surface, and definitely we have seen a significantly stepped up, risk activity, the threat activity in the hands of highly sophisticated and motivated state-funded APT groups. Attacks are getting more and more targeted and aimed at just about every single CII in every emerging or mature digital economy. Uh, but this doesn't automatically translate to a good security strategy and a good security roadmap and the desired budget availability for the CISOs. I think CISOs have a role to play. They have a role to play to create that big picture for the enterprise, but within the big picture, prioritize well. This is so very important because it's not just the budget, it's also the implementation effort, the fine tuning of these technologies. And I often refer to this a phrase called security theater, where there is a product one today, product two today, and with all due respect to the vendors, they keep repackaging, repurposing different forms of technology with different levels of overlaps into something what they see being relevant at that point. But picking the right components from the right offerings and adding this up to what would be your multi-level, I'm sorry, multi-year security strategy I think is absolutely vital. And within that, where do you prioritize and where do you want to start? Because remember, besides all these efforts with the core technology and security teams, there is also an important human element in the form of your users and their adaptation, acceptability, and their experience matters as much. So, security is important, but this sits alongside other business priorities. You can't just storm every discussion with a security problem. So, how do you get seen as an enabler while, of course, bringing in the right and strong and undeterred and unfazed the risk management side, because that's also eventually your responsibility as a security leader. Uh, but how you prioritize and where do you start fixing what you feel is the immediate problem in the context of your enterprise and your business? I think that's an absolutely vital element and step in the whole sequence of a multi-year journey, which could take 3 years, 5 years, and of
True.
course is an ongoing effort because the whole threat landscape is also very rapidly evolving and taking a completely different shape as we speak.
Perfect. Thank you, Jaspal. But before I let you go, we've got a small little, kind of a game that we want to play with you, a virtual game. So I would share my screen, and pardon me. The idea is to, present the other side of you. So quickly checking, are we all able to see my screen, guys? Jaspal, can you see it as well? So
I can
this
see the
would be
screen.
okay, so this is, just to see your personal side. So it's up close and personal with Jaspal. Some rules to the games. So we've got your camera on. Jaspal, is there a water bottle or a glass, anything that's close to you that you could probably keep in your hand?
I have a glass of water.
Okay. The third rule is you've got to be candid. You can't think too much. Whatever comes to your mind, yes, no. It's a yes, no game. So you just
Okay.
have to spell it out. And the minute if it's a yes, you have to take a sip of water. So you're ready. You've got to be fast. You've got to be honest. And the idea is that we all want to know
I
you
think
a
I
little
think
bit.
I'm gonna end up drinking a lot of water in this session. But go on, Shankar.
Let's see. Let's see. So the first question is, it's a never have I ever. If you played, my daughter who's 16 now, I play a lot with her. But anyhow, so never have I ever sent a mail to a wrong recipient. All of us have done that plenty of times. But checking, would a very senior chief information security officer have you done that as well?
Well, I sipped already, so yes.
Okay, so that is good to know. So next is, have you ever attended a Zoom or a WebEx or any session actually in your boxers, Jaspal? Sorry, it's a little too personal, but taking the
No,
liberty.
no, 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 but not because I wouldn't have done it, but I'm not a boxer person. I'm a jeans person, and
Sure.
so I
So
did. Yeah,
then you're excused. Cool.
yeah,
Have you ever dozed off during one of those, I would not say boring official meetings, and pardon me, I hope there are no lots of folks from Tata Comms who are there joined in, but
that's okay.
checking with you. It's a Friday and we're taking some liberties.
That's okay. I think this is, yes, I would have certainly been a guilty to this, as would have been many other people. But I think this also tells us, the skills and the relevance to keep your stakeholders engaged in a completely remote
So
working day are also very different than what it used to be when you were sitting face to face.
completely agree. Never have I ever. You've been embarrassed in front of your colleagues, I'm sure, and I want to check on you, Jaspal.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? I mean,
Sure.
I'm
All of
also
us.
a human and I have my own, weak sides. And
Sure. Never have I ever said in a virtual Zoom meeting, we'll take this offline.
okay, we can pass this one.
Sure. Have you ever danced in an elevator all by yourself?
No, I'm not a person who likes dancing, so I would
Join
not have done this.
Sure. And oh, this one's interesting because I checked your profile. You seem to be a biker. So, have you ever prioritized your biking trip over your son's PTM at school?
Well, I'll make it more interesting. Me and my son just completed a Ladakh bike ride and he skipped a few college days. So not only I skipped his PTM, he also skipped a few days of college. But I feel there is more to life than just doing what we feel is our main responsibility and exploring in the way you would like to. Not everybody may be up for biking, but the way you like to and going out of your natural comfort. Most people see biking as a leisure activity, but on the contrary,
It's
serious bike rides involve a lot of planning and require a lot of discipline. And of course, they test your grit and your determination and a lot of other traits. So I see this as a great sport, and this is my way of breaking out from my day schedule.
so good to know that, Jasper. And probably one of the second last ones. Have you
Okay,
ever? No,
dance
no,
is not
that's
me.
right.
So
Okay, so we'll skip this one. I know you're into martial arts as well. Have you ever had an embarrassing fall during a martial arts session?
yeah, yeah, and sometimes it happens on the most significant days, which is the grading days. So yes, I think it's like that fear of doing something wrong on the day when it's most important for you. But I think all of us have those,
Oh, definitely. Cool.
yeah, moments.
So, a yes and no. Would you rather have a terrible boss but a great job, or a great boss but a terrible job?
I think if you take the ownership of what you do and you are able to, steer it in the direction where you get a good support from your peers, your seniors, that's as good as it realistically gets in a corporate setup. I think everybody is there for a purpose, and if we can see each other's viewpoint and we can move the journey move in the journey, moving the needle in the right direction. I think that's as good as I expect it to be. So I haven't had bad moments here.
Perfect, perfect. So, thank you, Jispal. We had so much fun. So, I hope Would you agree that you've never ever had so much fun during a webinar?
Yes, it was a very interactive session in a very different way. So I enjoyed it
Thank
and
you.
wish all of you the best for the rest of the session. Shankar, great speaking with you, and thanks for having me here. Bye bye. Good day.
Pleasure, Jispal. Thank you so much. Okay, so that was, I will not say Mr. Jispal Sani, but yeah, Jispal, a wonderful person. Thanks to the DSCI team, I interacted with him the last couple of days, and honestly, what an amazing human being, and the Chief Information Security Officer that we all know him. So, moving on. I think we let me just go back to our schedule, but I think what we gathered from Jispal was the fact that even at his level, one there are very set things that he talked about in terms of what needs to be done, how the security is evolving at a rapid pace. So I think continuing with that, let me now invite my colleague, my buddy, I call him the tech geek at Tenable, Sudeep. And the idea is that Sudeep would cover an important topic, which is measure and prioritize risk across your entire attack surface. So, team, can we? Oh yeah, Sudeep, you're right there. So, thank you, Sudeep. And let me before I let you speak, I just have one small little announcement to make, which especially for the folks who joined us now. I just want to ensure that they also know that we've got something interesting lined up. So to all of the folks, all my colleagues who just joined in, please, there's a small little surprise that we have for you. If you could just scan that QR code, with your cell phones, just scan that QR code. It's a small little form, and when you fill that form, towards the end of today's masterclass itself, we'll announce the five lucky winners. I'll personally get in touch with them, get their addresses, and courier this very interesting no spill flask to all of you. And with that, let me introduce our next speaker, Sudeep, my tech buddy. At Tenable, Sudeep is the system engineering manager. Sudeep is a security and cloud technical expert that has been empowering organizations to protect their business at the speed and scale of cloud. At Tenable, he leads the system engineering function that helps Tenable customers in transforming the security posture, across tools, across if it's cloud, if it's on-prem, IT, OT, he's your go-to guy. And prior to Tenable, Sudeep has led leadership positions at IBM and RSA in the technical side. He's an industry veteran. I'm sure you all know him. He's won so many industry security accolades and delivered wonderful security sessions. So, with that, Sudeep, over to you. Quickly checking if your presentation is visible, and then it's all your show.
Hey, thank you, Shankar. Let me try and share my screen first. And okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shankar, and a very good morning to all attendees. I'm absolutely thrilled to be presenting here, and especially after Jaspal's very practical approach and advices that he gave. I think I can build on that. He has set a good stage for me to talk about prioritization and the overall attack surface, right? So that is what I'm going to talk about. Measure and prioritize risks across your and I don't want to lose on the continuity that we have now been seeing in the industry around the zero trust journey around things. So I'll help and tie up how the vulnerability management program is a crucial ingredient in the overall journey that most organizations today are embarking on in this fully decentralized and distributed environment, right? So with that, let me start off with the data points, right? Data points always help us focus. And just as he mentioned, it's a Friday, so we can, we can thank people who are gathering this data for us to really help us focus on what is the real problem, right? We are talking about vulnerability here, right? So we know that vulnerabilities are increasing. I'm going to take that liberty of being on a Friday to say, by the time Cheteshwar Pujara in the last days did run, there was one more CV that got announced, right? Sorry, Cheteshwar. I'm a big fan of Cheteshwar, no offense to him, but that's the fact that we do have a whole bunch of vulnerabilities. And the fact remains that half of these vulnerabilities that actually make an impact, most of them are more than a year old. So it's not just that, but then also the other flip side of it is a vulnerability as it gets exploited, within 5 minutes, the havoc can be there, right? So one, we see old vulnerabilities. Just while talked about the Prince Fuller vulnerability from 2017, which is now taking relevance. So there are vulnerabilities which are old ones, which are getting precedence, but once it is used, it can be very, very quick by the time it is actually gaining that foothold within the organization, right? And we also know, and few of the startling facts that has come up in the recent past, it's not startling, we always knew it. Most of these vulnerabilities are really working to find a foothold on IDs. In other words, the Active Directory within an organization, right? Most of this malware are working on Active Directory. Half of them are coming through the web app, things. We talked about containers to take the journey forward on the web applications and all, but these are all stuff that we all know. And this is what makes us create our vulnerability management program within the organization so important. But we also know, based upon this 18,000 vulnerabilities per month, per year, and the backlog that we have a huge number of vulnerabilities and configuration issues and issues that we need to remediate. So we have backlog. We have been, we find it difficult to really work on that. But the point also remains is that it's only 3% of these vulnerabilities that actually has the highest probability. 97 of these percent of vulnerabilities actually very low probability. So we clearly can establish that there is a need factually and as well as intuitively that approach of getting a vulnerability and remediating it has to be supplemented by something more intelligent, more smart. And that is what I intend to present in this particular next 15 odd minutes, so that we are well on time for the next session, where well, I'll refer to that next session and during my presentation, right? So now that I've established that we can do smart here, and we know that it is a big problem out there, let's delve into what we feel can be a simple mantra to help you with the vulnerability management program. And the mantra is, I first should know, which is again very intuitive. I should know what is the extent of my problems. Right? Many of these problems, I could ignore them problem, but I should at least know what are them. I should know what is my weakest link in that paradigm of security. We all know that it's the weakest link that will make the problem, break the chain. And there are many paradigms there, so the many phrases that we use on that. But the fact is, if I know the complete extent of the problem, that is the first base. Because that base is so broad and so big and full of backlogs, I need to be able to find the what is it that I should do that matters, right? Identifying things. And this is where the whole risk-based vulnerability management paradigm has come into picture. And in my next slide, in our next session in the masterclass, Jeff would talk about the prediction in a much more detailed manner, which I'm not going to do at this stage, so that I can focus on the overall process here, right? And once I have done that prediction, as usual, I need to act on it. How do I act on it? What ensures that what I have seen, what I have prioritized is actually getting driven, right? So if I have to see everything, and that these are the 3 slides that I'm going to do a little more discussion as we go forward. What is everything in today's world? Today's world is everything: the connected fridge, or the connected pacemaker, or my critical application, or my mobile device. I guess it's everything, right? On your home network, if your smart fridge or your smart bulb or your smart lock is compromised, and on that same network your laptop is also running, and on that laptop you have the VPN which is talking to your internal network, it's all connected, right? So what is everything? Everything is everything. Really speaking, whatever is the digital space that we are using today is everything. And out of this huge everything, what it is matters, we talked about that 3%. I'll come back to that. And of course, act. How do I act? And we'll talk about that as we go. Another part which I will talk briefly is act and communicate. It's so very important for us to let the business know that we're doing something. So how can we actually take business together? And just while alluded to that as well, it's the entire team that we have to work on. So how to communicate, right? So let's start. What is the modern attack surface? Again, there are many such slides which are there, and I have taken the slide which makes, from a vulnerability perspective, a little more sense to us, right? So we have the traditional IT, which is what we have. The influx of internet-enabled devices, the IoTs and the IIoTs. That's the way of life today. It's there today, right? We cannot deny the fact that many of these attacks are happening in our industrial networks, and many of these are happening in our internet-enabled devices. So the OT environment is equally playing a part, working out their presence in the present world, right? And then, of course, the actual apps. right? The web apps, the applications, the containers, the APIs, and so on and so forth, right? So that is there. Now, if that is the environment, there are many ways that I can find what this attack surface is. And this, to our, from our perspective, we need to be able to do it both in a passive manner as well as an active manner. Passive manner means automatically find out what this environment looks into. Look into the network traffic, look into the interactions, figure out what is communicating with what, and find out a surface in that. Now, once I have done this passive querying of the entire environment, I have seen everybody, then I need to go ahead and prod more and find out more. And that is what we call as the active query, right? So in our world, in our world of IT, it would be find the network to see who are communicating with each other. And the second step could be do an authenticated scan. So log on to that system and try and find out more. Similar aspect we have gone ahead and done on the OT devices, and that's one of the patented activity that we have done, which says not only are we monitoring the OT devices in a passive manner, but also using active queries on the OT devices. We pull that data up to get the main visibility, and so goes on the web applications, the API, and so on and so forth, right? So combination of passive and active is what gives us the thing. To this entire thing, we talked about AD as a big chunk of focus of. So what we have done is also on the AD side, we did some more specific active activities, active queryings that we do on the AD environment to understand what are the problems that is there within the AD. It's a very complex environment, the AD environment itself. And so we try and find out what are the relationships which are there, which is toxic in nature, which is compromisable in nature, and try and find out that attack surface, right? So once we've done what is the problem, that is where we start doing the management part of it, right? So all of these is what we are familiar already doing using the Nessus and all. And Jeff will talk about that more in our next masterclass, next session in the masterclass. But once we have the entire piece, the IT piece, the OT piece, the cloud piece, the web app piece, the mobile device piece, all those connected devices through active and passive enablement, then we get the complete list of vulnerabilities. Now that's a huge one, right? The vulnerability problems, the configuration problems, we've got that. That is where we start doing our ML-based data crunching to be able to find out what should I prioritize. So we take two things. We take the vulnerability, we take the threat intelligence, we take the exploits, we take the recent activities, and then plug that into the assets that we want to protect, the business context of those assets, merge them together to reach that 3% that we should remediate right now. Now, I'm not going to go deeper into this at this point of time because we have a whole session working on this. So please do stay on for that particular session where we will talk deeper around how ML is really helping us find out what is most important, find out the one which is most important today, right? Every time a new exploit is, a vulnerability is provided, and after some time, whether it is a 0-day or a 100th day exploit, there is an exploit that comes in. And once we identify the exploit, the criticality of that vulnerability rises. So today, the criticality might be different from yesterday, and so on and so forth. So on a continuous basis, we need to be able to find out what is most important. And then and that is where Tenable with its machine learning output will help you find out which are those most important ones and go ahead and focus your energy on that particular piece, right? So now that we have the prioritized now this prioritization, and one of the point which I want you to pay attention, it's also the predictiveness of this prioritization, which means what we are doing by studying the trends across years of researching vulnerability, which are those vulnerabilities which has high probability of getting exploited tomorrow, right? That is what we are trying to do. We are trying to stop the attack. So the predictiveness of the VPR score helps us not only identify which are most critical for us, but also based upon how exploitable it is. What is that is which is increasing our cyber exposure, right? So, the predictiveness of our scoring is also an important aspect that you should look out for, to focus first on what matters first. Right? So we have treaded the first two steps, and now the last step really is measuring. How good are we? How have we improved? What is the maturity with which we are assessing? Are we assessing everything with the right frequency, with the right schedule? Are we assessing everything that is there? Are we assessing our applications, our Active Directory, our OT devices? So there is a measure that we have come up with which helps you identify what is your maturity level as far as assessment is concerned, right? And how effectively you fare with your industry standards, right? So it always helps to see, should I be doing more? So we talk about the assessment maturity as one of the measures. We talked about the remediation that we are doing, right? Remediation could be in so many different ways. Patch the system. That's the first remediation or blocking. We could do, we could take the system offline. That's also a remediation. Or we could put a virtual patching in place, block the ports. There's so many different ways we remediate. What is the maturity of that remediation process? What are the third-party endpoint controls that we can deploy, which can help us with those maturities? So we take these things together and come up with a value that can be tracked over a period of time so that you can see how you are improving. And with all this, we create what we call as how exposed are you to the external threats, right? So from inside out, inside in the sense your organization, how secure is it, so that I can know how my cyber exposure score is improving and I'm becoming more and more secure. Right? And this is an objective score that can help the business unit put the actual money on the table. Right? So that's what we are thinking. So with these measurement data points, what we are doing, we're trying to make sure that we are improving on our capabilities around the vulnerability management program, which is the most important building block of any risk-based security program within the organization. Right? And now that we have identified proxies, so one of the things that we always talk, and it's quite intuitive again, is the actions are not taken by the vulnerability management tool, right? So the vulnerability management program itself is not going to take the action. The action is taken on the ecosystem. And that is where we have done a whole bunch of work. We have made sure that we are able to talk to the ecosystem, which will take that. So we will be able to correlate the threats that we have identified with the threat intelligence data. We will be able to correlate with the SIM systems and the cloud configuration systems. When we're doing authenticated scan, can we pull the data out from the privileged access management system so that it can be seamlessly done? So managing the credentials, managing the workflows for the patch management or the configuration management that we have to do. So integration with a ServiceNow or a BigFix or an SCCM or a satellite of Red Hat, or for the container security part, working with the Jenkinses of the world. So there's a whole bunch of these workflows that needs to be done, which we are enabling using the Tenable platform. And of course, working with the entire ecosystem is through APIs, which means it's open and anybody can go ahead and build the right kind of API-based interactions so that the whole journey of vulnerability management, from identifying to remediating and feeding back that data into the next scan, is accomplished. Right? So that's what the whole approach is that we talk about in terms of things. So to summarize, I will go back to what we talked about earlier. Complete and continuous visibility of vulnerabilities and issues around configurations across the modern attack surface. And by modern attack surface, we're talking about applications, networks, containers, OT devices, IoT devices, traditional IT, and of course the cloud devices, right? So the entire gamut of the IT infrastructure that your organization is using is the modern attack surface. And we need to be able to do this on a continuous basis, not on a weekly basis, not on a monthly basis, or not on a, of course, those are also important. These frequencies also, but it is as much continuous as possible based upon the risk that particular device poses to us. So once we have that visibility of vulnerabilities and configuration issues around these, we need to do a risk-based vulnerability management so that we can prioritize and predict which are the vulnerabilities and which are the issues that I should be remediating first. And as we are remediating and continuing with this cycle, measure what you are doing so that you can see the improvement, track the improvements, and communicate those improvements to the business leaders so that they can answer this simple question: am I really secure, and how secure am I? So that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to me. That is all
I,
that I had to
I,
present.
thank you, Sudeep. But I won't let you go because there are some questions that have been asked. So I'm going to just pose them to you. So thank you to the audience. My questions are first, Sudeep. Do ransomware attacks figure in the boardroom discussions in Indian companies? Have you seen discussions around ransomware attacks taking place in Indian boardrooms?
As I was working sometimes as sir team, ransomware discussions used to be boardroom only when the ransomware hit. But in the last few years, I'm happy to say that it is also a discussion before it hits, right?
Which
So
is which
absolutely,
is yeah, which is a good sign.
yeah, absolutely. I think people are it's not being reactive anymore around ransomware because it's a well-established fact that it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when.
True. The other question, which I know you kind of covered, but I think I'm glad somebody asked that question, is how has AI, enriched the entire vulnerability detection endeavor?
AI, in Tenable right now, we're not really using AI per se. AI is a very broad term, right? AI is, sorts of telling me what to do. Uh, what we are actually doing in Tenable is using the machine learning capabilities to crunch the data and create models for prediction, right? So we have been looking into data for over like 20 odd years now. So what we are making sure that all this knowledge that we have, all this data that we are able to use that data. And that is only possible using the machine learning algorithms. The traditional algorithms really cannot help us use that data. So yes, we are using machine learning to crunch through this data, create the models that can help us predict what you should be prioritizing, right? And we're actively using that for our measurement purposes and prioritizing purposes.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, Sudeep. As usual, pleasure to have you. And what a lovely presentation. And the best part, we are only 6 minutes behind our schedule, but I'm sure we'll cover that. So thank you, and thank you to all our listeners. It's always good when we have an active participation, and thank you for those claps and thank you for those thumbs up sign. It's good to get that, especially when you've tried to put on the agenda as per something that would be of interest. So with that, let me now bring up my colleague, my buddy from California, Jeff. Team, if you could have Jeff join me on the stage, please, on the virtual stage. Hi, Jeff. I can't even say good morning to you. Good evening.
That's okay. Good morning works. It's close enough.
Pleasure. And Jeff, just some announcement for the audience. So you'll just have to give me a couple of minutes. I just want to share my screen and actually share this with everybody. To all my colleagues, industry colleagues who've just joined us, please don't forget that we've got a small little surprise for all of you. Pardon me if you've seen this, but this was just for some folks who joined us now. So we've got a small little raffle that we're running. If you scan that QR code, you'll get a small Google form. Please fill that up. Basis your response towards the end, I would definitely announce those 5 lucky winners. There are no tricks. There are nothing. It will be a random selection, and I'll work with all of the winners to get their physical addresses and courier this interesting flask to all of them. And with that, let me introduce Jeff. Um, Jeff is a wonderful colleague, guys. So besides the part that he's my mentor and he is my senior in the marketing function, he's been there in the security industry for more than 15 years, working for some of the best known companies in the industry. Jeff has experience up and down the security stack, from the client side scanning and perimeter security solutions to encryption technologies as well. Here at Tenable, he runs the security solutions team. He works with technical and research teams to understand the pros and cons of the wide range of vulnerability risk management methods utilized in organizations of all sizes, be it a large enterprise or be it a startup or be it a SME. He understands their space, and hence his suggestions are very customized and tailor made. And the best part about Jeff is that if you want to know anything around vulnerability management program and its transition, how it's evolved over time, honestly, there could be no better person than Jeff. So with that, let me give it to you, Jeff. Can we quickly see if your slides are working?
Sure.
And I hope you've got your coffee mug along with you. Sorry, it's a little too late for you.
No problem.
Perfect.
Are you seeing my screen?
Checking with the folks. Jeff, I can't see it. Can you just try it again?
Sure. Oh, I see. Share. And then present.
Yep.
How's that?
Perfect. Oh, perfect. That is awesome. All over to you, Jeff. Take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you for that warm introduction. I think you give me a little too much credit. There are definitely people who know more than I do. Definitely. But when I'm done with this presentation, I want to scan that QR code because I want a chance to win. But,
Not at all. Folks are pretty.
There you go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Today, I really want to talk to you about really why you want to upgrade from Nessus Pro to the full Tenable platform. As you probably know, Tenable is known for Nessus. In fact, we've talked with many of our customers who don't even know that we have anything else other than Nessus. So it's how we entered the market. It's what we were known for a number of years before we actually developed that next stage of the full platform. And it's certainly a fantastic scanner, but there's so much more that you really need to get out of your security program than Nessus Pro can actually provide. And I'm going to really kind of spend the rest of the session discussing that. So if you think about it, in the Indian market, we kind of have 3 different kind of silos, if you will, or kind of 3 different areas. So we, for the companies who are really immature in their security program, they have VAPT, or the vulnerability assessment and pen testing, and for that, you're really using a lot of ad hoc data collection. They're not necessarily scheduled. And even if they are scheduled, they're certainly not on a regular basis. So perhaps it's once a month or once a quarter that you're collecting your data. And it's very, very manual, not just to collect it itself, but also to analyze it. So because you're analyzing everything by hand, you have super limited context. You really only have the context that's right in front of you, essentially that your scanner knows. Unless you're actually going out and physically going to, on average, 10 websites per vulnerability in order to get an appropriate level of context. And that can take hours for every single vulnerability. And if you're like me and you're like any other most other companies, you don't have that kind of time. So you're probably not really doing it justice. You're not doing that full analysis. So the next stage in kind of that maturity curve, or climbing that maturity mountain, if you will, is vulnerability management. And with vulnerability management, you're going certainly beyond just vulnerability assessment, but you still have pretty limited visibility. You're probably only looking at kind of your traditional on-premises IT assets. And as a result, you probably have pretty poor communication because there's no communicative values that are actually built into the tools. And then, of course, you have ineffective prioritization. And the reason for that is because if you're kind of in that legacy world, you very likely also have, you're using CVSS in order to prioritize. And CVSS, specifically CVSS base scores, in order to do that prioritization. And as we kind of go throughout this presentation, I'll explain a lot more about CVSS base scores, and kind of what they were intended to do, what we've inadvertently grown them to be, and therefore what the shortcomings are. But I'll just kind of leave it as an introduction for right now. And then, of course, in that third and final stage of that kind of maturity mountain that you want to climb is risk-based VM, risk-based vulnerability management. For that one, really seeing every asset across your entire attack spectrum. You are actually able to use predictive technologies, data science, AI, in order to actually predict what matters the most. So which vulnerabilities, which assets are most important to the organization, and what are the highest level vulnerabilities that are on those most important assets, and therefore prioritize those, fix those first. And then, of course, we want to act. Once we figure out what that priority is, then we want to act in order to reduce the greatest amount of risk with the least amount of effort. So that's really the ultimate goal that you really want to get to. So if you're still kind of way over here on the left in VAPT world, you have a long way to go. So that's really what we're going to focus on for the rest of this presentation. So what's the problem? If you're like 99% of the companies out there, what are you really facing? Well, first of all, you have way too many vulnerabilities to start with, and they're actually growing at an exponential rate, much faster than you can ever actually manage them and certainly remediate them and close them. You also have that list of vulnerabilities is also with no context or guidance for some of the reasons that we just discussed a moment ago on the last slide, and that is that you have to do everything by hand. So getting everything by hand, having no additional context, no additional information, no additional color, you're kind of on your own. You don't have anything to help you kind of ferret through that problem and figure out what's going on. And let's face it, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're relying exclusively on CVSS, and I'll kind of put an additional piece on that, CVSS base scores, in order to do your prioritization. And as I'll be discussing throughout this presentation, I almost don't even want to put CVSS and prioritize in that same sentence because CVSS was actually never intended to be a method of prioritization. We are these days using it for something that it was never intended to do, and therefore it is really ill-equipped to actually handle. So I told you at the beginning, we're going to talk about the five ways or the 5 reasons. Well, the first reason to move from Nessus Pro up to, say, Tenable EP, or essentially a full risk-based vulnerability management program, is you need to modernize your security program. Now, what I've been talking about so far is this ever-growing list of vulnerabilities, and no context, no color, no capability to actually do anything with it, to effectively prioritize what's most important. And that's really what a very modern platform like Tenable EP or Tenable Exposure Platform is actually going to enable you to do. It not only utilizes all of the technology and all the great scanning technology that Nessus Pro has, but it also brings in, it takes that and then layers across the top all that data science, all that artificial intelligence, all of the predictive technologies, reporting capabilities, all of those components that will now actually enable you to do everything you need to do and actually fully understand and therefore be able to effectively communicate to your management how secure you are, how effective your security program is. Because let's face it, we can actually be going out there and working our entire team all day, every day, closing as many vulnerabilities as possible. But if we don't know if we're working on the right things, then we're still at a huge disadvantage because we might actually be wasting the vast majority of our time. And in fact, what Tenable research has actually shown us is that nearly 75% of all CVSS, or essentially all vulnerabilities with a CVSS base score of 7 and above, nearly 74% of those pose little to no danger. So that means that you're wasting the vast majority of your time on things that don't actually matter. They can, at minimum, be deprioritized in favor of the very few that actually should take a priority. And some of them can not just be deprioritized, but actually categorically ignored and just kind of put to the side and not worried about it all. And we'll get into some of those statistics in just a little bit. In fact, it's this slide. So last year alone, we saw 18,000 vulnerabilities disclosed. These are brand new vulnerabilities disclosed in 2020 alone. Now, if we back up just 4 years earlier than that, it was just over 6,000 vulnerabilities disclosed in that year. So that means in just 4 short years, we just about tripled the number of vulnerabilities that we're seeing in our environment. And that's why I keep alluding to this ever-growing list and this rapidly growing list. It's really because 4 years tripling the volume, that's huge. Because I'm willing to wager that you haven't seen a triple in the number of team members over the last 4 years. So if the amount that you have to deal with has tripled and the number of people dealing with them has not tripled, now we're at the problem is simply exacerbating. It's getting bigger, it's getting more rapid, and we're quickly going underwater. So if we kind of been barely treading water, and then all of a sudden the water rises much more rapidly, we're underwater and there's nothing we can do about it. So think about that. Now, as I mentioned, when we go over to the right here, CVSS 7 plus or 7 and above, many of our organizations that we deal with have that as a remediation policy. They're supposed to remediate everything with a CVSS score of 7 or above, which is essentially all their criticals and highs. So if they have to fix all of those, we found that there's just this huge percentage of vulnerabilities that fall in that range. So in fact, 57% of all vulns across the entire spectrum fall into that camp of 7 and above. So that means that if you even have if you have 1 million vulnerabilities in your environment, you have to actually fix 570,000 of them if you're using the CVSS 7 and above policy. But as I mentioned just a moment ago, 76% of that 57%, 76% pose little to no actual danger. So there's no risk, or at least no immediate risk. But yet you're wasting all of that time because your team just sees, okay, it's a 7.3, we got to fix it. Without any context or color, that's all they've got. Now, the flip side of that is if you're using a 7 and above policy, it means that by your very nature, you're saying anything that falls CVSS 6.9 and below, you won't even look at. You're going to categorically ignore those. Well, the flip side of our Tenable research is that 44% of all of the vulnerabilities that pose a fairly immediate risk actually fall below a 7.0 on the CVSS base score. So it means that while you're wasting 76% of your team's time, 44% of the most risky vulnerabilities in your environment are going to stay there because you're ignoring them. So just some things to think about. Now, just one last stat down here at the bottom right that I'll mention is that 20% of all vulnerabilities have an exploit available. Now, I mentioned that because this is let's face it, our hackers, the adversaries are lazy. They would rather, there are so many exploits that are sitting there that are just freely available on the dark web. They'd rather take that, modify a couple little pieces of code here and there, and send it out, than to actually write new code from scratch. So having those 20% that have vulnerabilities already and exploits already available to them mean that they are really at the most risk. So you really want to focus on that 20% first. So it means that 80% can actually at least be put off because they don't pose an immediate risk, because the likelihood of an attacker actually writing brand new code when all this code is available is very, very low. So enough of the statistics for now. Reason number 2, you really need to see your entire attack surface. Now, one of the major things that we see is that so many organizations are looking strictly at what kind of is in scope of what they actually need to get done for to pass their audits. So if you're really building your entire security program around passing an audit, then you're actually missing a great deal of what really needs to be done, because what is in scope for audit isn't necessarily your most business critical assets, and many of your business critical assets fall outside of scope. So you really want to look beyond what's in scope. You want to look at your entire attack surface, and that includes not just kind of what is and is not in scope for audit for compliance, but also getting beyond what I mentioned earlier of that traditional on-site IT asset, and getting into your entire attack surface. What's in your cloud? What about mobile devices? What about your IT or your OT assets? What else do you have in your environment across your entire attack surface that you need to protect? And you need to get into those types of things. So the problem with our existing VA and VM is, as I mentioned before, it's really limited to those traditional on-premises assets. It also uses static point-in-time scans. So that means that, again, as I mentioned before, if you're only scanning, say, monthly or sometimes quarterly, I've heard a lot of people saying that they're only scanning quarterly. The problem is that we have a very, very dynamic environment. The threat environment is extremely dynamic. And if you're only doing scans, say once a month, that's a very static thing to be doing, where the threat environment can change tomorrow. And you won't know that it's changed in your environment until a month from now if you scan this morning. So you
Jeff,
scan
if
this
I can,
morning.
sorry, if
Yes.
I can just win. We've got cases where the vulnerability scans happen once in 6 months, or in fact once in a year. So I know what you're saying makes so much sense, because here we're talking about a month, but we've seen cases where some of our customers actually have this regime where they're scanning their infra probably once in 6 months and once in a year. So very valid point, Jeff. And sorry for that interruption. I also want to give you a quick time check. We've got 7 minutes, Jeff. I know it's a little too less, but whatever best we could cover in those 7 minutes, please.
Okay, sure, thank you. And yes, that's a great point. So the longer you go, the more static and the less relevant those scans become. So as I mentioned earlier, and thank you for that time check, Shankar, your attack surface is continuously expanding. So once upon a time, we were only looking at this kind of teal area in the bottom, but what today's attack surface looks like is this entire fan. And we need to make sure that we're covering all of it. Now, the third is you really need to predict based on full context. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're using just CVSS base scores, you don't have any context or color. It only looks at exploitability. So it doesn't actually understand the whole concept of risk. It doesn't understand what threats are happening. So what Tenable does is we bring in two completely different ratings. So on the left-hand side here, we talk about VPR, or our vulnerability priority rating. And what VPR is, that's your machine learning, that's your artificial intelligence, that's your data science, saying we understand what is going on with this vulnerability because we've scanned the entire internet, we've scanned the dark web, we know what the chatter is, we understand what is going on with this and what attackers are really focusing on. And we use that predictive technology now into the future and say, based on that, we also know what's likely to be attacks in the future. And we bring all of that into a VPR score. So now this is a full context component on that vulnerability. So this is everything we know about that vulnerability, not just exploitability. Though we do use the CVSS score as a component of VPR, it's one of many, many components. And then on the right-hand side, we pair it with what's arguably more important, and that's the ACR, the asset criticality rating. Now, this is something that's really specific to just your business, because it doesn't matter if you have a VPR of 10.0 on an asset that you don't care about. Maybe it's in a lab. Maybe it's something that doesn't have access to anything. Or it may be the opposite. You may have a VPR of only 5.0, but it's on the most critical asset you have because it runs your financial database or it has all your customer information on it. So we bring those two together, everything we know about the vulnerability and everything that we understand and what you've told us about your business and what assets are most critical to you, we bring those together, and that brings it into what we call the cyber exposure score, and that is full context. So what's the problem with your VM? Again, CVSS base score only. It only has that theoretical view of risk because a CVSS base score is typically assigned within 2 weeks of a new vulnerability being discovered and assessed. And then, of course, it's a static scoring methodology. So once it's assigned, it's never looked at again. So no matter what's happening in the world, it doesn't change at all ever again. Whereas your VPR changes continuously. We actually update it every 24 hours. So this kind of gets to what I was talking to you about CVSS base scores. So you have your base metric on the left-hand side here, and really it's just looking at exploitability. Now there are two other components of CVSS v3, and that's the temporal metric group and the environmental metric group. Now these were CVSS's kind of attempt at becoming more relevant and less static and a lot more dynamic. But the problem is that the temporal and the environmental scoring systems don't work. They are rife with false positives, false negatives. They're so bad that every organization I've ever known that started using them, it pretty much immediately abandoned them, and they've gone back to the base score. And the base score works, but it has all the issues that we've talked about before. So it just is not sufficient, no matter what. And this just kind of gives an example of, this is actually the Soden ransomware from a couple of years back. And you'll see how this top line, this was actually the VPR score from Tenable. And it changed as we had different modifications in what was happening in the world. Threat intensity increased. We had threat recency. We actually had ransomware that took advantage of it. So it went up and down as the world changed. Whereas your CVSS v2 and your CVSS v3 stayed exactly the same as the day they were assigned. So really what Tenable does is it actually helps you act very quickly and confidently, because we have this huge data lake of 20 trillion pieces of threat, exploit, and otherwise security data that includes all different aspects of the security spectrum. And it utilizes all of that in order to perform very deep data science and machine learning so that you can actually act with confidence because you know that this score is something that's based on extreme relevance. So kind of to finish up on the VM, we've talked about it. It's time consuming. It's very manual. There's no context or color. It disregards key aspects of vulnerabilities, not least of which is what are adversaries actually talking about? What are they actually targeting? And what are they actually doing? And what are they likely to do in the future? And then, of course, because of all of these things, it's insufficient to be able to help you confidently act. And it's because all vulnerabilities aren't created alike. We actually, in our VPR score, that VPR score that I mentioned earlier actually has 150 different aspects of a vulnerability. And these bullet points are just a few of the pieces that are actually included in that. But you really need all of this in order to have full context and awareness. And finally, last but not least, is measuring. You can't, if you're only looking at how many vulnerabilities you've closed or how many assets that you've freed from vulnerabilities and remediated, then you still don't know if you're working on the right things. So if you just tell management, hey, we had 100,000 last month and we only have 990, we only have 99,000 this month. We took care of 10,000. Well, but what did you do about risk? Did that actually help you? So since you don't understand, since you don't know what is right and what is wrong, you're really relegated to just very, very indistinct measures of success. And you don't understand if you're actually removing risk from your environment or not. And with that, let me go ahead and stop because I think I'm just about out of time.
Thank you, Jeff. You could probably read my mind. So thank you. I think I need to get my colleague Mundassar in. But Jeff, from all of us here, at DSCI, at Tenable, a big thank you. And in your style, I know you do a namaste very well, and you have the other parallel that even I don't know. But yeah, thank you once again.
All right, thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Cool. Okay, so now is the time that I've got my colleague, my buddy. As they say, "Har dost zaruri hota hai." So the person next on stage would be one of my favorite guys at Tenable. Somebody I've had lots of chai sessions with. So why don't I introduce him? But more importantly, to all of you, we're towards the last two sessions. This one is more of a demo, so that you actually get a sneak peek into what we are all about. And to welcome on stage is my buddy Mudassar. Both of us sit in the same office. We've had umpteen number of chai sessions. He's my go-to guy when it comes to anything on technology. In his role at Tenable, he takes care of the entire North and government patch. So anybody out there who's either in a government department or in a PSU, he's your guy. He understands the security stack very well. And prior to joining Tenable, Mudassar was with HCL and Tulip IT Services in leadership roles. So Mudassar, over to you. I'll stop
Thank you so
share so that. Thank you.
thank you so much for giving such a cool introduction. I'll straight away go on to the agenda because
And
of the
Mudassar,
time
we just
constraint.
have 10 minutes. Yes, please. We just have
Yeah, I'll
10
try to.
minutes talk. Thank you.
So basically, I'll be presenting a short demo of our on-prem REST-based platform, which we call it Tenable.sc. It is a very powerful platform. It can ingest data from multiple scanners deployed at single locations or multiple locations, as well as it. We have also multiple types of scanners which pump the data into this platform. Like we have active way of identifying the vulnerabilities. We also have passive way of identifying the asset and the vulnerabilities into the assets. So apart from it, we also have an agent-based scanning, which on the same platform. So I'll straight away jump onto the demo of this product. So this, as I said, this platform is a very powerful platform. It has around 400 plus different d- dashboards, which cater to different requirements of an organization. The beauty or the plus point with all these dashboards is like it. All these dashboards can be customized as per your requirement, as well as you can create your own dashboards from scratch based on your security policies. So this is one of the dashboard like host discovery. If you refer to any security policy or a framework, it start with the asset identification or asset discovery. So basically, with Tenable, or you can say Tenable SC, it can help you to identify the known assets as well as unknown ones. When I say known one, it means many times we know that the asset is there, but we don't know what are the different services running on those assets. Likewise, there are many assets which we are not aware of. So as I said, we have multiple scanners. There are multiple ways of identifying the assets within the organization. So Nessus is one of it. So Nessus is a schedule scanner which you need to schedule it to get the required information. Likewise, we also have passive scanner which we call it NNM. So basically, instead of querying the target devices, we continuously monitor the traffic in real time basis. So with the use of active scanner and passive scanner, we can give you the real time security posture of the organization. It is something very unique to Tenable. So if you can refer this dashboard like the third one with NNM, 10 hosts has been identified by this NNM, which is continuous in nature. If you further drill down, just wait. If you further drill down, are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Yes, Mudassar.
So basically, with this NNM has identified 10 IPs which are trying to connect to your networks. This is something very unique to Tenable as well. On the left hand side, you will see the plugin ID which has been used. So plugin ID 12 is being used for identifying any new host coming to your network. So not only the identification of asset, we also help organization to create a workflow. Like with the same plugin id, we have a filter for it, like plugin id 12, which is basically used for identifying any new host by way of passive scanner, which we call it nnm. You can take the actions on the fly, whether you want to assign a ticket or if you want to email to any user, whether you want to generate a syslog which can be further pumped into your SIM. Likewise, you can launch the scan as well. So any new host coming to your network can be scanned with the use of this workflow as well. So many times organization has a security policy that no asset will be allowed to connect to their network, but many times there is a violation because of operational issues, business requirement. But with the use of passive scanning, we can give you the real time security posture of your organization. So any host trying to connect to your network, whether during the weekends or maybe during the night, with no manual intervention, it can scanning can be launched, and you will have the correct security posture of that particular asset. So as I said, we have multiple types of dashboards and you can have based on your requirement. So these are the different dashboards. On a high level, you can further drill down. You don't need to do anything, you just need to click it and it will get automated, the data will get automatically populated in it. So there are, we have dashboards very specific to RBI. If there is any BFSI customers, with the use of these dashboards you can have the real view of your organization with few clicks. Not only this, many organizations have a mindset like, I do have protection with antivirus, I do have EDR in my environment, why do still I need this VM in my environment? So let me tell you, like, all these legacy controls like antivirus, EDR, we complement those solutions, like, and those solution comes under detection layer. It means detection layer means, like, whenever there is an actual attack, they will give you an alert, else they will remain silent, they will not trigger any kind of alert. But with the use of this as our solution, you can drill down and check on the probable reason why that attack is happening. Like this is one of the dashboard which for WannaCry, this was one of the outbreak which has happened around few years back. So organization were having each and everything, every security controls in their environment, but many organization has suffered because of this outbreak. So with our solution, you can check the on the current status of if the device or the asset can be still be prone to that attack or not. Not only this,
Mudassir, sorry,
yeah.
Mudassir, just 2 3 minutes more, please. We've got the next speaker lined up.
Okay,
So
okay,
if
no
you could
issues, no
just
issues. So,
thank
so
you.
okay, so this is one of a very important thing. Like, apart from the vulnerability management, we can also help organization to check the running configuration of the devices against the best practices. So we are having around 800 plus different audit files. These are nothing but the best practices against best practices, and you can check. Not only this, you can customize these audit files as per your requirement. You can upload your own audit files as well. So apart from this, we also have reporting templates. um, the kind of reporting templates we have is humongous. We are having around 300 plus reporting templates which can be customized as per your requirement as well. In Cisco, it only we are having around maybe 8 to 10 different reporting templates. So uh, because of the time constraint, it normally takes maybe more than an hour to complete all the features and functionality. So the it is impossible, or it's very difficult to cover each and every aspect of this tool. So to summarize it, it is a very powerful tool, and it is one of a tool which is 100% on premise. So if you have some security policy that you don't need to send the data outside, this is the must, or you can, this is one of the this is the only option, because
Perfect. Did we lose Mudassir? Okay. Hey, thank you, Mudassir. That was awesome, and sorry for cutting you short, because I definitely want to introduce our next speaker again. One of the industry veterans, somebody I've known over the past 2 years, and somebody I look up to when it comes to anything in technology and especially security. You've got the right person. So why don't we bring up on stage Rakesh, please? Thank you, Rakesh. And Mudassar, thank you, buddy. I think we had to, probably move to the next session. But thank you for your demo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let me introduce our next speaker, who actually needs no introduction. Rakesh is somebody who is well known in the industry. He is currently the AVP and head of infrastructure security at Geo Platforms. Honestly, if you want to meet somebody who is a hardcore tech savvy professional, he's the one. So anything in security, and since I know him and since I've worked with him, audience who are listening to me, please, if you ever have anything around vulnerability assessment, pen testing, forensic investigation, security solution implementation, reverse engineering, incident management, DevSecOps, cloud infrastructure, honestly, Rakesh is your guy. And the best part, he is so approachable. He's so ground to earth. So just reach out to him, and you'll get your answers. So thank you, honestly, Rakesh. It's a pleasure that you could join us. And why don't I know in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you some tough questions. So please help us with your honest answers. And the idea here is that please give the audience something that they can replicate, they can learn from your vast experience and obviously your expertise. So the first question to you would be, you know, uh,
Thanks, Ankar, first of all, for a lovely introduction. And
thank you.
yeah, so I think the next 20 minutes that I am having, I would like to give my best shot so that those who are actually listening to me can get some benefit out of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Rakesh. That's actually the intent. We've done so many events. I think we've reached a stage there, small is better, and we want to just give the best to our audience. So, my first question to you, Rakesh, would be security leaders like yourself are overwhelmed with, so many vulnerabilities. We at times call it the vulnerability overload challenge, and the need to know actually is what matters. There are so many. So you tend to prioritize. You don't know how to tackle that problem. What is your, you've been a early adopter, what would be your suggestion to your fellow security leaders?
Yeah, I was actually listening to Jeff, and Jeff was pointing out that most of the companies are actually performing uh, scans, vulnerability assessment scans on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, or biannual or annual basis, right? So it's a time-based activity. To be very frank, unfortunately, the way the organizations are designed, the way the complete infrastructure is designed, that's what is right now available with us. Okay, now if we have to play with the what resources, what environment, what technologies that we have right now in our hand, then we how actually best you have to implement it. Imagine, first of all, only 3% of the vulnerability, in fact less than 3% of the vulnerabilities that has been identified till date are having exploits. That means we are dealing with more than 97% vulnerabilities which do not have any exploit, do not have any threat or any risk. Now, if we have to actually work on the actual matter, then we have to clearly define roles and responsibilities of the teams who are involved in this journey. So for vulnerability management to become a success, to make a successful vulnerability management program, you actually need minimum four teams. One is the security team, who should be a hardcore technical guys who understand vulnerabilities, risk, and who also know how to exploit those things. The second is the orchestration team. Many times, actually, People says that only scanning is not going to help us, it's not giving us much, so after 2 3 years they actually end up changing their domain. That's why, because after the scanning, their only role is to share those reports and then leave it to the implementation team to implement, and then again they will validate. That's not the way that vulnerability management program should run. Okay, so security team should understand every single vulnerability that they are highlighting to the customers, and they should also know how to fix it. We should have an orchestration team. The orchestration team main role is to actually deal with the security team and the asset owner, because the asset owners are actually the owners who owns that risk, so they should understand the risk. In case the understanding gap is there, then security team should come in the picture, otherwise the orchestration team can actually deal with this. And the last but not the least, the implementation team. Okay, now if you have to club all those four teams, what's the best way? See, currently, if you deal with any vulnerability management solution, when you scan an asset, it will give you hundreds of vulnerabilities against every single asset. Now, are those hundreds of vulnerabilities are going to be fixed by one implementation team? The answer is no, because the vulnerabilities can be on OS layer, the vulnerabilities can be on application layer, database layer, middleware layers, right? So what we have to do is we have to actually create profiles for each and every vulnerability,
So true.
map those profiles with the technology owners, and automatically integrate the vulnerability, whatever vulnerability management solution that you guys are using, pump all those vulnerabilities records to a big data analytics, which is the need of an hour. The big data analytics will process the vulnerability record. It will also inject the asset owner details. It will have the profiling information. For example, a vulnerability, if it is related to OS, then it will bucketize automatically into an OS bucket. And whoever is actually the technology owner, that means an OS owner or middleware owner or database owner, automatically that vulnerability should get reflected in their bucket so that they can take an action. So this
Perfect.
complete workflow is required to make this as a successful journey. One important point that I will like to highlight in this particular case is, again, because we are bundled with bombarded with so many of vulnerabilities, so it's humanly it's not possible to actually analyze each and every vulnerability and to understand what risk that vulnerability is possessing. Okay, the first thing that security team has to do is they have to actually eliminate those 97% of the vulnerabilities that I was talking about. So we have to define two different process. One, the standard patch management process that can follow a quarterly or biannual or whatever company policy it is, where we have very much less risk. Those should follow a standard process. I'm still okay with that. But the vulnerabilities which has exploits available, whether it's a local or remote, okay, those has to be picked from that report and should be taken up by the red team red team guys, so that they should understand whether actually those vulnerabilities are exploitable or not in nature or not. If they are exploitable in nature, they should exploit it, highlight it to the concerned team, and get those fixed within next 24 hours to 48 hours. That as an emergency patch kind of thing. So we have to remove basically the critical patches which matters separate and deal it in a separate way, and the normal standard patches we have to deal it in a separate way to actually suffice all those audit functions and the certifications which required by the organization.
Perfect. I I've come to something, and that's actually a question that's come from the audience, Rakesh, uh, and that's very linked to, when you talked about the scanning frequency. Many of the organizations, actually outsource their entire security audit function to vendors instead of having it in house. From your knowledge, what are your suggestions on a practice like this? Would you recommend that we keep something like security in house, or there are facets of the entire scanning, the entire vulnerability management program that can be outsourced? Your views, please.
I believe we can actually adopt the hybrid model in this. Uh, I am completely in 100 more than 100% in agreement that we should have an in-house security team who would be responsible, in fact, accountable for identifying the risk factors within the organization. They should be hardcore technical guys, and the orchestration piece is where actually most of the technical guys faces challenges and they don't want to do that. Okay, that orchestration piece, for that particular role we can hire consultants, because not much of the technical expertise required in that orchestration piece, orchestration steps, right? Because it's kind of planning and organizing, talking to all those asset owners and all those things. That is where most of the uh, guys actually spend most of their time, which they should not. So I believe the orchestration piece can be outsourced to the third party. And suppose today if that person is there, tomorrow if that person is not there, still orchestration can happen by a new resource. But a
Very well.
hardcore technical security guy who's actually dealing with your security profiles, security organization, he understand your organization, he understand where the risks are, right? And then he actually perform those testing. Now, that kind of understanding to build an organization, especially like in Geo Platforms Limited, you need at least 2 to 3 years of experience in Geo, right? So that's where I strongly believe that security team should be in-house team, should be a very technical team, and they should only handle technical things. The orchestration piece can be handed over to the basically can be
The
outsourced
partner.
to the third party. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll now come to probably the last question, because I want to keep some time for an interesting, engaging round with you as well, Rakesh, which is a surprise. So the last question is, we seeing a kind of a shift left approach. Everything, everything is as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and security kind of is an afterthought. What would be your take on this, Rakesh?
See, ideally, most of the organization, security is actually acting as an afterthought only. See, the biggest problem that most of the organization have, they don't treat their development environment the way they treat their production environment. They think that the development environment is a playing ground where their developers can play, right? And production environment is where we should not play anything and it should be properly secure. Unfortunately, during the development, when the developers are playing with the codes, playing with the application, right? They most of the times they are actually developing those codes on a vulnerable applications, and that is further moved to a production. And once the application is built and that vulnerability is there, then you cannot even patch it in the production, because when you actually go and try to patch it in production, the development team will say no, we have actually developed this on this particular platform, and currently this supports only this vulnerable platform. So for next release we need another 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months. So actually the production environments becomes vulnerable because your development environments is vulnerable. Okay. Now, the new technology shifts which is happening. So everything is coming as a service. Infrastructure as a service, software as a service. Now, in this, all services as a service that now getting offered by the respective companies, they actually not fully dealing with the security as a service in all the services that we are talking about. Like infrastructure service should have security inbuilt in it, right? Software as a service should have security inbuilt in it.
Very
It
well.
should not work as an afterthought. The shift left approach that you are talking about, see, this is a time when we have to actually empower our development team, our infrastructure team who is actually giving all this as a service. Imagine, for example, if you need a container to be spinned, right? And if the container is spinned and then it is offered to the security team, and security team is actually taking their own sweet time to actually perform the assessment and then share the report and then it's fixing. Then again, the complete objective of giving it as a service gets failed because of the security, because security has taken an afterthought process. Now, what we have to do is we have to empower the development team. We have to integrate most of the tools that we have, security solutions that we have, in the pipeline itself. We have to train those developers so that they can use those tools, although they are not security professionals, but they can actually trigger a scan or they can run a scan, and we can define a policy which will have everything in place. So they do not have to put their brains in it. So for example, if I want to build a container image, right, I can integrate security solutions within the pipeline itself. It can check for your codes, it can check for integrity of all the packages that you have. It can also check for the vulnerability thing, it can also check for the hardening configuration audits, right, automatically. And
True.
in case a critical remotely hackable vulnerabilities is found, then you can fail that build. Otherwise you can pass that build.
Very true.
And even the report, if you are failing that build, the report should get automatically download at their end itself. They should not come to security at all.
Very,
Security team should do only and only manual penetration testing, okay, which cannot be automated.
very true. Very
So
interesting.
understand the industry needs an automation. Automation is the key for success in security. The moment we automate, more benefit we are actually going to get in this world, especially
Perfect.
in this digital era. Yeah.
Thank you. And now comes to my favorite part, Rakesh. This is a surprise for you, so please pardon me if something is
I
a
hope
person,
it's
but
not. Yeah.
no, no. So the idea here is to actually do a rapid fire round with you, and this rapid fire questions, you only have the option of choosing one between the two options, and the idea is to get that, the human behind that tech geek Rakesh. So we want to just relate to you. So I would start that, Rakesh. You have to be honest. You have to be fast, and just help us. Just tell us what you actually are. If given the option, would you watch a nail
Anytime
biting
cricket. Anytime cricket.
cricket? Okay, so
I
A.R.
love
Rahman,
I love playing and watching cricket. Okay, so
wonderful. We got your answer.
yeah.
Would you rather have an endless supply of books, or are you a gym guy?
To be very frank, I will not go for both the options.
Okay.
I'm not a
And
very bookie guy and not
so,
even a gym guy.
what if those books were to become security books? Then you might think, right?
I still believe that I don't believe mostly
Books.
on books. I
Okay.
believe on the hand-on practice that I have.
Perfect. Would you rather have an unlimited supply of cell phone data? Obviously, you have the power for that. Or would you like to, have an unlimited supply of petrol in your car? Because I know you go on long distances also.
I think petrol in my car. In fact, diesel in my car. It's a diesel car, so
The first
yeah.
one is a given. The first one is a given.
Yeah.
Are you a ice cream person? Are you a pet person?
Uh, Not both of them, but
Yeah.
in the two choices, I'll prefer ice cream.
Ice creams. Okay. Would you rather be a famous security guru or would you want to start your own startup?
I will love to become a security guru, definitely.
And then start a startup, right? Okay. So you prefer the security guru part.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather do something what you love and make just enough money or do something you hate but make billions of dollars? Sorry, it's a little personal question, but I thought a Friday we'll take some liberties.
I I think I will like to balance my professional and personal things. So
Sure.
I'm not
Sure.
running towards dollars, but yes,
Okay.
I
Do
need
something.
a very good profile and I need a very good team and the manager, which
Wonderful.
I'm currently getting in my current organization.
Very well answered. Finally, if you could meet one person, living or dead, who would that person be, Rajesh?
My wife,
Oh wow. Okay. Good. Would you rather work in a big city or a small town? Assuming your profile remains the same.
I will prefer small towns.
Wonderful.
I just need the internet connectivity to be good.
Perfect. That is it. Thank you so much, Rakesh. I hope you enjoyed as much as we did. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence.
Thanks, Shankar, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you. Okay, team DSCI, thank you. I think we need to thank you as well. And just before I go, can I just take one more minute? I promised something to my audience, so I actually, while everybody was answering the questionnaire, I actually have done the spade work. And if you permit, can I just announce the winners of that small little quiz? So to everybody, if you're still on, these are the winners who actually filled up the form. So thank you, George. Thank you, Sankaran. Thanks, Ashwarya. Thanks, Richa. And thanks, Ashish. And with that, we would close this masterclass. Thank you, all of you, for listening to us. And thank you, Rakesh, once again, from all of us here at Tenable and DSCI. Happy to have you, and we shall be back soon. Thank you.